The 68th floor of Reed Financial Solutions hummed with the kind of tension that only billion-dollar disasters could generate. A panoramic view of Manhattan stretched beyond floor-to-ceiling windows, the city gleaming in afternoon sunlight, oblivious to the storm brewing inside. Ethan Reed stood behind his mahogany desk, eyes scanning the skyline, as if the city itself might offer solutions to the algorithmic nightmare that had plagued his company for 3 months. At 34, he had built Reed Financial into a technological powerhouse dominating markets across 3 continents. His perfectly tailored Tom Ford suit couldn't hide the frustration radiating from his 6-foot frame. The stubble on his sharp jawline suggested sleepless nights, though his pride would never let him admit defeat. The development team is requesting another meeting, his assistant Marcus announced from the doorway, voice carefully neutral. Everyone knew better than to push their demanding CEO when he was in this mood. Tell them I don't want excuses, I want solutions. Ethan's voice cut through the air, making the words sound even more dismissive. We've thrown 50 million at this problem. Our stock has dropped 18%, and still no one can crack this quantum encryption protocol. The door closed with a soft click, leaving Ethan alone with his mounting anger. Despite hiring the best minds money could buy, MIT graduates, Stanford PhDs, former NASA engineers, had failed spectacularly. Through the windows, he watched the city that never slept, oblivious to his billion-dollar headache. The irony wasn't lost on him that the man who could buy anything couldn't purchase the one thing he needed most: a solution. Ethan briefly considered calling James Morrison, the veteran industry mentor who had guided him when he first started his career. The 65-year-old had an uncanny ability to see solutions where others saw only problems. But Ethan decided against it. This was something he needed to solve himself, a test of his own leadership. The soft sound of a vacuum cleaner humming in the outer office broke through his brooding. Ethan glanced at his Patek Philippe watch. 11:47 p.m. The cleaning crew was making their nightly rounds, invisible workers who maintained the pristine environment where fortunes were made and lost. A knock interrupted his thoughts. "Come in," he called, expecting Marcus with more bad news. Instead, a young woman entered, pushing a cart loaded with cleaning supplies. She moved with quiet efficiency, her dark hair pulled back in a practical ponytail, wearing the standard gray uniform of the cleaning company. Something about her posture caught his attention. She carried herself with a dignity that seemed oddly out of place. "I'm sorry, Mr. Reed," she said, her voice surprisingly clear and educated. "I can come back later if you prefer." Ethan studied her for a moment. Most cleaning staff avoided eye contact with executives, but this woman looked directly at him with intelligent brown eyes that held no trace of intimidation. "Interesting. No, go ahead," he said, turning back to his computer screen, where lines of impossible code mocked him. "I'll be here all night anyway." As she began dusting his bookshelf with methodical precision, Ethan found himself stealing glances at her. There was something almost meditative about her movements, as if she found peace in creating order from chaos. Unlike the frazzled energy of his highly paid employees, she radiated a calm competence that was oddly soothing. "You work late hours," he observed, more to distract himself from his problems than out of genuine interest. "Night shift pays better," she replied without looking up. "And it's quieter, less complicated." Something in her tone suggested she knew about complications. Ethan found himself curious despite himself. "What's your name?" "Sophia," she said, simply moving to clean his desk area. Her eyes inadvertently fell on his computer screen, where the impossible algorithm code was displayed in all its maddening complexity. Ethan noticed her pause, her cloth hovering over the surface of his desk. He also observed how her left hand briefly touched a worn wristwatch, seemingly an unconscious gesture of concentration. "Problem?" he asked sarcastically. "Don't worry, you won't break anything." He let out a bitter laugh. "Though at this point, I'm not sure it could get any worse." Sophia's eyes were fixed on the screen, her brow furrowed in concentration. "This is quantum encryption," she said quietly, almost to herself. Ethan's head snapped up. "Excuse me." She seemed to realize she'd spoken aloud and quickly looked away. "Nothing, sir. I should finish and let you work." But Ethan was standing now, his full attention focused on her. "No, what did you just say about quantum encryption?" Sophia's cheeks flushed slightly. I recognize some of the mathematical patterns. I used to study computer science." "Used to, ooh." Ethan moved closer, his business instincts suddenly alert. Before becoming a janitor, the question hung in the air like a challenge. Sophia's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. Life doesn't always follow the plan, Mr. Reed. There was steel in her voice now, and Ethan realized he'd touched a nerve. Good. In his experience, people revealed their true nature when pushed. This algorithm, he said, gesturing at the screen, has stumped teams of PhD mathematicians for 3 months. It's cost my company millions. But you think you recognize it? Sophia's eyes met his directly. I didn't say I could solve it. I just said I recognized the pattern structure. Ethan felt a familiar thrill, the same sensation he got when sensing opportunity in a business negotiation. Here was either an opportunity to expose this woman's pretensions or something else entirely. Tell you what, he said, his voice taking on the smooth, dangerous tone that preceded his most ruthless business moves. If you're so confident about patterns, here's a challenge. He pulled out his phone and transferred funds with a few quick taps. I just put $155 million into an escrow account. Solve this algorithm, and it's yours. Sophia stared at him as if he'd lost his mind. Mr. Reed, I think you are not being serious. I'm always serious about money, Ethan replied, his dark eyes glinting with a mixture of amusement and challenge. You have 4 hours. Solve what MIT's finest couldn't and walk away richer than most small countries. Fail and admit you're just another janitor with delusions of grandeur. The silence stretched between them, heavy with unspoken implications. Sophia's cleaning cart seemed to mock the absurdity of the situation, a billionaire offering a fortune to a woman who cleaned toilets for minimum wage. Why would you do this? Sophia asked quietly. Ethan shrugged, though his casual gesture belied the intensity in his eyes. Call it entertainment. I'm tired of watching expensive experts fail. Maybe it's time to see what happens when someone with nothing to lose takes a shot. Sophia looked at the computer screen again, then back at him. Something shifted in her expression, a hardening of resolve that transformed her face completely. When she straightened her shoulders, she no longer looked like a janitor at all. 4 hours, she asked. 4 hours. Sophia moved to his chair and sat down with a confidence that made Ethan's pulse quicken. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard for just a moment before she began typing with a speed and precision that immediately told him he'd made either a terrible mistake or discovered something extraordinary. Sophia's fingers flew across the keyboard with the fluid grace of a concert pianist, her previous deference completely abandoned. The transformation was so complete that Ethan wondered if he was witnessing an elaborate con or something far more intriguing. The core issue isn't the encryption itself, she murmured, her voice taking on a completely different cadence, analytical, confident, with undertones of excitement. It's the quantum entanglement verification protocol. Whoever designed this was thinking in classical terms about quantum behavior. Ethan moved behind her chair, watching lines of code appear and disappear faster than he could follow. The scent of her shampoo, something clean and understated, reached him, and he found himself oddly distracted by the graceful curve of her neck as she worked. You're debugging 3 months of work in real time, he observed, his voice closer to her ear than strictly professional. I'm not debugging, Sophia replied without looking up. I'm rebuilding. Your team was trying to force a square peg into a round hole. The mathematical foundation was flawed from the beginning. Her confidence was mesmerizing. This wasn't the hesitant janitor from 20 minutes ago. This was someone who spoke the language of advanced mathematics as fluently as she breathed. Where did you learn to code like this? Ethan asked, genuinely curious now. Sophia's hands paused for just a fraction of a second. MIT Computer Science and Applied Mathematics double major. Graduated summa cum laude. The casual way she dropped this information while completely rewriting his company's most challenging project struck Ethan as either massively arrogant or entirely truthful. Either way, he was fascinated. MIT, he repeated, and you're working as a janitor because sometimes brilliant people make catastrophically stupid personal decisions. Sophia said, her voice tight with controlled emotion, like trusting the wrong person with everything they've built. There was a story there, and Ethan found himself wanting to hear it. In his experience, the most interesting people were those who'd fallen from great heights and survived. Betrayed, he guessed. Sophia's typing never slowed, but he caught the almost imperceptible tightening around her eyes. He also noticed her thumb briefly brush against the old watch on her wrist at a gesture that seemed to give her strength. Business partner, also my fiancé, Aaron Wells. Amazing how efficiently someone can destroy your life when they have access to both your heart and your bank accounts. The bitter edge in her voice was unmistakable. Ethan felt an unexpected surge of anger toward a man he'd never met. He stole from you. He stole everything, Sophia said simply. Company patents, reputation, investment, capital. By the time I realized what was happening, he'd positioned himself as the genius behind our innovations at Quantum Shield, and me as the pretty face who'd gotten lucky with connections. Ethan studied her profile as she worked the strong line of her jaw, the focused intensity of her expression, the way she commanded the computer like it was an extension of herself. Nothing about Sophia suggested someone who'd gotten anywhere based on looks alone. Your patents, he asked. Blockchain security protocols. 3 of them now worth about 200 million combined. Sophia's laugh held no humor. Turns out love makes you sign documents without reading the fine print. Jesus, Ethan breathed. He'd heard of similar cases, brilliant innovators destroyed by trusted partners. But hearing it from someone currently earning minimum wage while casually revolutionizing his company's code created a cognitive dissonance he wasn't prepared for. The next few hours passed in intense concentration. Unlike his initial assumption, Sophia didn't solve the problem quickly. She encountered several significant roadblocks, muttering under her breath and occasionally touching that old watch when particularly frustrated. Ethan found himself genuinely impressed by her persistence and the elegance of her approach. Almost finished, Sophia announced, her voice returning to its professional tone. Your quantum verification system needed to account for temporal variance in entangled particles. The algorithm was assuming static behavior in a dynamic environment. Ethan blinked. I understood maybe half of that. You don't need to understand it, Sophia said with the first genuine smile he'd seen from her. You just need it to work. The smile transformed her completely. Suddenly he could see the confident MIT graduate she'd once been, the brilliant innovator who'd built something worth millions. It also made him acutely aware of how beautiful she was when she wasn't hiding behind the protective shell of someone society preferred to ignore. There, Sophia said, leaning back in his chair. Run the verification protocol. Ethan moved to look over her shoulder at the screen. The code was elegant in a way that spoke to mathematical beauty rather than mere functionality. Even with his limited programming knowledge, he could see the difference between this and the clunky attempts his team had produced. He executed the verification sequence, hardly daring to breathe. Numbers scrolled across the screen in patterns that had eluded his experts for months. And then, impossibly incredibly, the system displayed 2 words that had become the holy grail of his company's efforts: verification successful. Holy shit, Ethan whispered. Sophia stood up from his chair, smoothing down her gray uniform with hands that were perfectly steady. The escrow account information should arrive in your email within the next few minutes. The transfer will complete automatically once the system passes all verification tests. Ethan stared at her. You actually did it. I told you I recognized the pattern structure, Sophia said mildly, as if casually earning $155 million was a typical Tuesday night activity. Sophia, Ethan said, and something in his voice made her look at him directly. This is going to sound insane, but I need to ask, are you really a janitor? She tilted her head, considering the question. I really clean offices for 8 hours a night, 5 days a week. I really live in a studio apartment in Queens that costs 60% of my income. I really haven't used my MIT education professionally in 3 years. She paused, her eyes meeting his with unflinching directness. But no, Mr. Reed, I'm not really a janitor. I'm a computer scientist who ran out of options. Have dinner with me tomorrow night, Ethan said impulsively. Sophia looked at him with genuine surprise. You're asking your janitor on a date? I'm asking the most brilliant woman I've ever met to dinner, Ethan corrected. The fact that I met her while she was emptying my trash can is just interesting timing. Sophia studied his face for a long moment. Mr. Reed, we both know this is a terrible idea. Probably, Ethan agreed with a slight smile. But I haven't been this intrigued by anyone in years, and after tonight I suspect you might be worth a few terrible ideas. As Sophia left, Ethan considered calling James Morrison to tell him about this extraordinary encounter, but decided the story was too unbelievable. Besides, he wanted to learn more about Sophia Chen first, perhaps over dinner tomorrow. 24 hours later, Ethan found himself in the unprecedented position of being nervous. The Michelin-starred restaurant he'd chosen for dinner suddenly seemed too formal, too much like the ostentatious displays of wealth that had probably surrounded Sophia during her previous life and that had ultimately betrayed her. He'd changed restaurants 3 times before settling on a quiet Italian place in the village that was expensive enough to show respect, but intimate enough to allow conversation. As he waited at their reserved table checking his watch, for the 5th time in 10 minutes he wondered if Sophia would even show up. The hostess approached with a woman Ethan almost didn't recognize. Gone was the gray uniform and practical ponytail. Sophia wore a simple black dress that was elegant without being flashy, her dark hair falling in soft waves around her shoulders. She moved with the same quiet confidence he'd glimpsed the night before, but now it wasn't hidden beneath the protective anonymity of service work. She was absolutely stunning. Ethan noticed she still wore the old watch on her wrist, the only piece of jewelry besides modest earrings. "Mr. Reed," Sophia said as she reached the table, and there was amusement in her voice at his obvious surprise. "Sophia," he managed, standing to pull out her chair. "You look incredible. You look like someone who wasn't expecting his janitor to clean up well," she replied with a slight smile. Ethan felt heat rise in his cheeks. "I deserve that." As they settled into their seats, Ethan found himself studying her more openly. The woman across from him bore little resemblance to the service worker he'd met last night. Her posture was different, her expressions more animated. It was as if she'd been wearing a costume that she'd finally taken off. "Can I ask you something?" Sophia said after they'd ordered wine. "Of course. Did you really have 155 million just sitting around to throw at a random challenge?" Ethan laughed, and the sound was more relaxed than he'd felt in months. "Define sitting around, but yes, I could access that amount relatively quickly." "Why that specific number?" "It seemed large enough to be meaningful, but not so large as to be impossible. I was trying to calculate how much someone like you might consider worth the risk of looking foolish." "Someone like me," Ethan repeated. "You mean arrogant and reckless?" Sophia tilted her head, studying him. "I was thinking more like successful enough to take calculated risks and confident enough to bet against conventional wisdom." Her assessment was surprisingly generous, and Ethan felt something warm unfurl in his chest. "That's a nicer interpretation than I expected." "I'm generally not in the business of insulting men who've just made me financially independent," Sophia said with dry humor. "Though I have to admit the way you offered that challenge was impressively dramatic." "Impressively dramatic," Ethan mused. "I'll take that as a compliment." "You should. Most people with your kind of money are boring. All calculation, no instinct." Sophia took another sip of wine, and something in her expression shifted. "Actually, that's not fair. Most people I knew with money were boring, past tense." "Tell me about him," Ethan said quietly. "Aaron Wells and Quantum Shield." Sophia's hand tightened almost imperceptibly around her wine glass, her thumb unconsciously brushing against her father's watch. "What do you want to know?" "Whatever you're willing to share." For a moment, Sophia looked like she might deflect the question. Then she seemed to make a decision. "We met in graduate school. Brilliant programmer charming came from money but acted like he'd rather be judged on merit than family connections. I thought that meant he had integrity." Her voice remained steady, but Ethan could hear the careful control beneath it. "We started working together on blockchain protocols during our final year. The chemistry was incredible, both intellectually and personal. By graduation, we were engaged and had our first provisional patent." "What changed?" Sophia was quiet for so long that Ethan wondered if she would answer. When she spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. "I found out he'd been systematically documenting our work sessions, editing the recordings to make it appear like he was leading all the innovation while I was just following along. He'd been building a case that the intellectual property was primarily his for over a year." Jesus. "The patents were filed in both our names, but the supporting documentation told a different story. When our startup began attracting serious investment interest, Aaron used that documentation to convince investors that I was a liability. Brilliant but unstable, prone to taking credit for collaborative work." Ethan felt anger building in his chest. "How did he get away with it?" Sophia's laugh was bitter. He was very good at his job, and I was very good at trusting him. By the time I realized what was happening, he had investors, board members, and even some of our employees convinced that I was delusional. Your own employees. Aaron was charismatic. He made people feel valued, appreciated. When he started suggesting that I was becoming possessive about work that was clearly collaborative, they wanted to believe him. Sophia met Ethan's eyes directly. It's amazing how quickly people will accept a narrative that absolves them of having to choose sides. Ethan thought about his own employees, his own board members. How easy would it be for someone with the right skills to manipulate perceptions? Probably easier than he wanted to admit. What happened to the patents? Bought out my stake for significantly less than market value. The board voted. Aaron abstained, of course, to avoid conflict of interest. Sophia's tone was conversational, as if she were discussing the weather. I was given 30 days to accept their offer or face a lengthy legal battle with people who had significantly more resources than a suddenly unemployed computer scientist. You could have fought. With what money, Aaron had made sure I looked unstable and potentially litigious. No law firm wanted to take the case on contingency, and I couldn't afford to pay up front. Sophia shrugged. Sometimes the house wins, Mr. Reed. Ethan studied her face, looking for signs of self-pity or bitterness. Instead, he saw something that looked like hard-won acceptance. You started over, he observed. I tried to, but reputation follows you in tech. Aaron had been very thorough in his character assassination. Every job interview felt like an interrogation about my previous difficulties with collaborative work environments. So you became a janitor. I became invisible, Sophia corrected. There's a difference. As a janitor, no one expects brilliance. No one wants to hear your ideas. No one asks about your past or your potential. You just exist in the spaces between other people's important lives. The sadness in her voice was almost unbearable. Ethan found himself wanting to find Aaron Wells and make him pay for every slight, every theft, every moment of doubt he'd planted in Sophia's mind. There was a brief period, about 2 months, when I found work at Zhao Technologies, Sophia added, looking down at her plate. A low-level coding position. Nothing special, but at least in my field. Ethan's interest was piqued. Zhao Technologies, Victor Zhao's company, they're our main competitor for that major government contract. Sophia nodded. Aaron found out I was working there and personally called Victor Zhao. Suddenly I was terminated with no explanation. That was when I truly hit rock bottom. But you're not invisible, Ethan said, redirecting the conversation. Not to me. Sophia looked at him for a long moment. Mr. Reed and Ethan, he corrected, and I mean it. What I saw last night wasn't just technical skill, it was artistry. The way you approached that problem, the elegance of your solution, that's not something you can fake or steal. Ethan, Sophia said carefully, and his name sounded different in her voice. Warmer, more personal. I appreciate what you're saying, but have dinner with me again tomorrow night, Ethan interrupted. Sophia blinked. We're having dinner right now. Different dinner, different restaurant, same conversation, but deeper. Ethan leaned forward slightly. I want to know more about how your mind works. I want to understand what drives someone to rebuild their entire life from the ground up. And honestly, I want to spend more time with the most interesting person I've met in years. You barely know me. Then let me fix that. Sophia stared at him, and Ethan could practically see her brain working through the implications, the risks, the potential complications. Finally, she spoke. This is complicated, Ethan. 3 days ago, that might have been true, Ethan said. But yesterday, you made yourself $155 million richer. Which world do you belong to now? Sophia considered this, her fingers absently touching the worn leather strap of her father's watch. I honestly don't know. Then let's figure it out together. Something shifted in Sophia's expression, a crack in the armor she'd built around herself. Okay, she said quietly. One more dinner. Good, Ethan said, and his smile was genuinely warm, because I have a feeling we're just getting started. As if on cue, Sophia's phone buzzed. She glanced at it and froze. What is it? Ethan asked. Sophia's face had gone pale. Aaron, she said quietly. He wants to meet. The coffee shop Aaron had chosen was deliberately neutral, a chain establishment in Midtown that suggested neither wealth nor poverty, just carefully calculated anonymity. Sophia sat across from the man who had once been her entire world, studying the face she'd once kissed goodnight every evening, searching for any trace of the person she'd thought she'd loved. Aaron looked exactly the same. Perfectly groomed brown hair, expensive but understated clothing, the kind of smile that had once made her feel like she was the only person in the room. Now it made her skin crawl. "You look well, Sophia," Aaron said, his voice carrying that familiar tone of warm concern that had once comforted her during late-night coding sessions. "Really well, cut the crap, Aaron. What do you want?" His eyebrows rose in mock surprise. "Straight to the point. I always admired that about you." Sophia felt her jaw clench. "You have 30 minutes before I leave." Aaron leaned back in his chair, studying her with the calculating expression she'd learned to recognize too late. "I heard about your recent windfall, 155 million for solving an algorithm. Impressive." The words hit Sophia like ice water. "How did you hear about that?" "Sophia, you solved a problem that had been stumping Reed Financial for months. Word travels fast in our circles." "Our circles," Sophia repeated flatly. "I clean offices for minimum wage, Aaron. We don't travel in the same circles anymore." "Don't we?" Aaron's smile took on a predatory edge. "Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you found yourself a very wealthy patron. Ethan Reed is quite the catch." Sophia's blood turned cold. "Have you been watching me?" "I keep tabs on former business associates," Aaron said smoothly. "It's just good practice. And imagine my surprise when I discovered that my brilliant former partner was working as a janitor in the very building where one of my potential investors operates." "Potential investors?" Aaron's smile widened. "Reed Financial has been evaluating Quantum Shield's latest blockchain innovations for a possible partnership. Fascinating coincidence, don't you think?" Sophia stared at him, her mind racing through the implications. "You orchestrated this." "I orchestrated what? You getting a job cleaning his office, you solving his algorithm, you having dinner with him last night." Aaron shook his head with false regret. "Sophia, you always did have a tendency toward paranoid thinking." The gaslighting was so smooth, so practiced, that for a moment Sophia felt the familiar doubt creeping in. She gripped her father's watch tightly, drawing strength from it. Then she remembered Ethan's reaction to her solution, the genuine surprise and respect in his eyes. Aaron couldn't have faked that. "What do you want?" she asked again. Aaron pulled out a tablet and slid it across the table. "I want you to look at this." The screen showed a contract-dense legal language that Sophia's trained eye could parse quickly. It was a non-disclosure and non-compete agreement specifically related to quantum encryption algorithms. "This is my signature," Sophia said, her voice barely above a whisper. "From our original partnership agreement," Aaron confirmed. "Section 15, subsection C. Any innovations related to quantum computing or encryption developed during our professional relationship remain subject to joint intellectual property claims for a period of 5 years post-dissolution." Sophia felt the world tilt. "I never agreed to that." "Your signature suggests otherwise. You added this clause after I signed." "Prove it." Aaron's smile was razor-sharp now. "The document is properly notarized, legally binding, and filed with the appropriate authorities. Any court would uphold it." Sophia's hands were shaking now, and she pressed them flat against the table to hide it. "Even if this were legitimate, I didn't develop anything for Yuku. I solved Ethan's algorithm independently." "Did you?" Why? Aaron tilted his head thoughtfully. "Because I have documentation suggesting that some of the foundational work you used in that solution was developed during our partnership. Specifically the temporal variance calculations that made your breakthrough possible." He was right, and they both knew it. The mathematical framework she'd used had been part of theoretical work they'd done together 2 years ago, work that had seemed purely academic at the time. "You can't prove I used that framework." "I don't need to prove it, Sophia. I just need to suggest it." Aaron leaned forward, his voice dropping to an intimate whisper. "Think about what happens when Reed Financial discovers that their brilliant new consultant might be legally obligated to share her innovations with a competitor. Think about how that affects their willingness to work with you." Sophia felt sick. "Ethan isn't working with me professionally." "Isn't he?" "Because my sources suggest he offered you a position with his company just yesterday, And the timing of your dinner date certainly suggests a professional relationship with personal benefits. The way he said it made Sophia feel dirty. You're disgusting. I'm practical. Aaron's mask slipped for just a moment, revealing something cold and calculating underneath. You cost me 18 months of development time, Sophia. 18 months of having to recreate innovations that were rightfully mine. I'm simply recouping my losses. Those innovations were mine. Prove it, Aaron said again, and the repetition was like a slap. In court with lawyers while Reed Financial watches their potential partner become embroiled in a lengthy intellectual property dispute. Sophia stared at him, understanding finally dawning. You want money. I want what's fair. 50% of your recent windfall seems reasonable. 77.5 million as compensation for the foundational work that made your solution possible. And if I refuse, Aaron's smile returned bright and terrible, then I file an injunction preventing you from using any algorithms that incorporate shared intellectual property. I leaked the story to the tech press about the legal disputes surrounding Reed's quantum encryption solution. And I make sure every potential employer in the industry knows that working with Sophia Chen comes with significant legal risks. The threat was comprehensive and devastating. Even if Sophia could eventually prove her case in court, the process would destroy any chance she had of rebuilding her career or her relationship with Ethan. You bastard, she whispered. I'm a businessman, Aaron corrected. And unlike you, I learned from our past mistakes. I don't let emotions cloud my judgment anymore. Sophia's phone buzzed with a text message. Ethan's name appeared on the screen. Hope your meeting goes well. Dinner tomorrow still on. The simple message, with its assumption that she was strong enough to handle whatever Aaron threw at her, almost broke her heart. Ethan had no idea what kind of legal and professional nightmare he was about to inherit by association. I need time to think, Sophia said. Of course. Aaron stood smoothly, leaving exact change for his coffee on the table. You have 48 hours to transfer the funds. After that, I file the paperwork and contact the press. He paused at her shoulder, his voice dropping to that intimate whisper again. Oh, and Sophia, you might want to think carefully about what you tell Reed about this conversation. Men like him don't appreciate complications, especially complicated women who come with legal baggage. Aaron walked away, leaving Sophia alone with the contract and the devastating realization that even her escape from his influence had been incomplete. Her phone buzzed again. Another message from Ethan. Actually, why wait free for dinner tonight? Sophia stared at the screen, her heart breaking. She typed and deleted 3 different responses before finally settling on, something's come up, rain check. The response came immediately, everything okay? Sophia typed yes, and immediately deleted it. Then no, and deleted that too. Finally, she turned off her phone and walked out of the coffee shop, leaving the contract on the table like the poison it was. She had 48 hours to choose between destroying Ethan's trust or destroying her future. Either way, Aaron would win again. Ethan stared at his phone for the 5th time in an hour, willing Sophia to respond to his messages. Her sudden coldness after Aaron's meeting felt wrong, not like the confident woman who'd solved his impossible algorithm or the vulnerable one who'd shared her story over dinner. Something was very wrong. He considered reaching out to James Morrison for advice. The older man had connections throughout the industry and might know something about Aaron Wells. But without more information, Ethan was reluctant to bring Morrison into the situation. He was still debating whether to respect Sophia's space or track her down when Marcus knocked on his office door. Sir, there's an Aaron Wells here to see you. Says it's about a potential partnership opportunity. Ethan's blood ran cold. Sophia's ex-fiancé and the CEO of Quantum Shield. The timing couldn't be coincidental. Send him in. Onion, Ethan said, his voice carefully neutral. The man who entered his office was everything Sophia had described and nothing like what Ethan had expected. Handsome in a clean-cut, unthreatening way, with the kind of practiced charm that set Ethan's business instincts on high alert. Mr. Reed, Aaron said, extending his hand with a warm smile. Aaron Wells, CEO of Quantum Shield Innovations. Thank you for taking the time to meet with me. Ethan shook the offered hand, noting the expensive watch and manicured nails. Mr. Wells, I understand you have a business proposition. I do, but first I feel I should mention that I know Sophia quite well, personal and professional history. The statement was clearly designed to provoke a reaction. Ethan kept his expression neutral. Ms. Chen is an associate of mine. Associate, Aaron repeated thoughtfully. Interesting way to describe someone you're dating. My personal life isn't relevant to this meeting, Ethan said coolly. What exactly are you proposing? Aaron pulled out a tablet and placed it on Ethan's desk. I'm proposing that you might want to reconsider your association with Sophia before it becomes professionally problematic. The screen showed legal documents, contracts, and what appeared to be development logs. Ethan scanned them quickly, his business law background allowing him to parse the essential elements. This appears to be an intellectual property dispute, Ethan observed. More than that, it's documentation proving that the algorithm Sophia solved for you incorporates foundational work developed during our partnership, work that remains subject to joint ownership under our original agreement. Ethan studied the documentation more carefully. On the surface, it appeared legitimate, properly notarized, legally formatted, with Sophia's signature clearly visible. But something felt off about the notary's stamp. He'd seen that license number somewhere before. You're claiming ownership of Sophia's solution. I'm claiming ownership of the mathematical framework that made her solution possible, Aaron corrected smoothly. The temporal variance calculations, the quantum entanglement protocols all developed during our joint research period. And you're telling me this because, Aaron's smile widened, because I assume you don't want your company embroiled in a lengthy intellectual property dispute, and especially not over technology that might be legally questionable. Ethan leaned back in his chair, studying Aaron with the cold assessment he reserved for hostile negotiations. What do you want? From you, nothing. This is purely about Sophia and our unresolved business relationship. Aaron's tone remained friendly, but his eyes were calculating. I simply thought you should know what you're getting involved with. How considerate of you. I try to be. Aaron collected his tablet and stood. Of course, if Sophia has misrepresented the legal status of her work to you, that could create complications, especially if your company plans to commercialize her algorithm. The threat was subtle but clear. Ethan felt anger building in his chest, not at the legal complications, but at the casual way this man was trying to destroy Sophia's life again. Mr. Wells, Ethan said, his voice taking on the dangerous edge that made his board members nervous. I appreciate you bringing this to my attention, but I should mention that Reed Financial has excellent legal counsel. If there are intellectual property concerns, I'm confident we can resolve them appropriately. Something flickered in Aaron's eyes. Surprised, perhaps, that his intimidation tactics weren't working as expected. Of course, Aaron said smoothly. I just thought you should be aware of the potential complications that come with Sophia's involvement in any project. After Aaron left, Ethan sat alone in his office, staring at the legal implications of what he'd just learned. If Aaron's claims were legitimate, Sophia's algorithm could indeed be legally problematic. But something about the entire interaction felt wrong. His phone rang. Marcus again. Sir, I have Professor Diana Foster from MIT on the line. She says it's about Sophia Chen and that it's urgent. Ethan took the call immediately. Professor Foster? Mr. Reed, I apologize for calling unexpectedly. Sophia was one of my brightest students, and I understand she recently solved a significant algorithm for your company. She did. I also understand that her former partner, Aaron Wells, has contacted you about intellectual property concerns. Ethan's pulse quickened. How did you know that? Because Aaron Wells has spent the last 3 years systematically contacting anyone who showed professional interest in Sophia. He uses the same legal documentation, the same intimidation tactics, and the same goal to ensure that Sophia remains professionally isolated. The contracts are fake. The contracts are real but incomplete. What Aaron doesn't share is the subsequent documentation that invalidates his claims documentation that Sophia developed independently after their partnership dissolved, and that clearly establishes her sole ownership of the relevant mathematical frameworks. Professor Foster's voice carried the authority of someone who'd spent decades in academic intellectual property disputes. Mr. Reed, Aaron Wells is a brilliant programmer, but Sophia is a once-in-a-generation mathematical innovator. What she created for you is entirely her own work. Why hasn't Sophia defended herself? Because Aaron is very good at making the legal battle seem costlier than surrender. And because after 3 years of professional sabotage, Sophia started believing that maybe she didn't deserve to win. Ethan felt his anger crystallize into something cold and focused. Professor Foster, would you be willing to provide testimony about the legitimate ownership of Sophia's work? I'd be delighted to. In fact, I've been waiting 3 years for someone to finally call Aaron's bluff. After ending the call, Ethan immediately contacted his head legal counsel. Within 2 hours, he had a comprehensive strategy for not only defending Sophia's intellectual property rights, but exposing Aaron's pattern of fraudulent intimidation. The sun was setting when he finally drove to Sophia's Queens apartment building. She answered her door looking exhausted and defeated, wearing old jeans and an oversized sweater that seemed designed to hide her from the world. "Ethan," she said quietly, "you shouldn't be here." "Aaron came to see me today," Ethan said without preamble. Sophia's face went pale. "What did he tell you?" "A very convincing story about shared intellectual property and legal complications." Ethan stepped closer. "A story that would have worked perfectly if I hadn't also spoken to Professor Foster from MIT. Sophia's eyes widened. "Diana called you." "She called to warn me about Aaron's pattern of sabotaging your career and to offer testimony that your algorithm is entirely your own work." Sophia stared at him as if he'd spoken in a foreign language. "But the contracts are incomplete. The documentation Aaron uses to intimidate people conveniently omits the subsequent agreements that established your independent ownership of the relevant mathematical frameworks." "I don't understand." Ethan reached for her hands, noting how cold they were despite the warm apartment. "Sophia, you've been legally in the right this entire time. Aaron has been committing fraud for 3 years, and no one ever called him on it because his victims couldn't afford to fight back." Sophia's legs seemed to give out, and she sank onto her couch. "That's not possible." "It's not only possible, it's documented. My legal team spent this afternoon reviewing your original partnership dissolution. Aaron has no legitimate claim to your work. But the companies that wouldn't hire me were scared off by lies. Lies he knew he couldn't back up in court." Sophia was quiet for so long that Ethan wondered if she'd heard him. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. 3 years. I've spent 3 years believing I deserved what happened to me." "You didn't deserve any of it." Sophia looked at him, and Ethan saw something breaking open in her expression. Not breaking apart, but breaking free. "What happens now?" she asked. "Now we destroy him," Ethan said simply. "My legal team is filing charges for fraud, defamation, and intentional interference with business relationships. By tomorrow morning, Aaron Wells's career will be over." "And us?" The question hung in the air between them. Ethan reached for her hand again, this time intertwining their fingers. "Us," he said quietly, "is entirely up to you, but Sophia, I need you to know something. What I feel for you has nothing to do with algorithms or business or solving problems. It has everything to do with the fact that you're the most remarkable woman I've ever met." Sophia's eyes filled with tears. "Ethan, I've been so scared. For 3 years, I've been scared of hoping for anything better." "You don't have to be scared anymore," Ethan said, moving closer to her on the couch. "I'm not going anywhere." When Sophia finally kissed him, it tasted like freedom. But their moment of peace was short-lived. The next morning, Ethan received an urgent call from his security team. Someone had tried to breach Reed Financial's secure servers overnight, targeting specifically the files related to the quantum encryption algorithm. "The attack was sophisticated," his head of cybersecurity explained, "but we managed to trace it back to its source." "Let me guess," Ethan said grimly. "Quantum Shield Innovations." "Not quite. The attack came from Zhao Technologies, but we found communication logs between Zhao and Quantum Shield. They're working together." Ethan's blood ran cold. Victor Zhao was the CEO of one of the largest tech conglomerates in Asia and Reed Financial's main competitor for a critical government contract worth billions. If Zhao had obtained the algorithm, the consequences would be catastrophic. He immediately called Sophia, but her phone went straight to voicemail. Growing concerned, Ethan drove back to her apartment, only to find it empty. A neighbor mentioned seeing her leave early that morning with a man who matched Aaron's description. Panic rising in his chest, Ethan called his head of security again. "I need you to track Sophia Chen's phone, now." "Sir, that's not exactly legal without—" "Do it anyway. I believe she's been coerced by Aaron Wells. This is now a matter of national security." While waiting for results, Ethan decided it was time to call in reinforcements. He dialed James Morrison's number. "James, I need your help with something urgent." Mr. Reed, the gravelly voice replied. James Morrison here. I was just about to call you. I just got off the phone with Victor Zhao. He claims to have your algorithm and is using it to leverage the government contract away from you. Ethan felt sick. That's impossible. The algorithm is secure. Not according to Zhao. He says your brilliant consultant gave it to him willingly, a woman named Sophia Chen. That's a lie, Ethan said fiercely. Sophia would never— I believe you, James interrupted, which is why I'm calling. Something doesn't add up. Zhao was too smug, too confident. Meet me at my office in an hour. Bring whatever you have on this Sophia and her ex-partner. Ethan's security team called back moments later. Sir, we've traced Ms. Chen's phone. It's currently at the Zhao Technologies headquarters in Manhattan. Everything inside Ethan went still. Had he been wrong about Sophia? Had this all been an elaborate con? He refused to believe it. There had to be another explanation. With his heart pounding in his chest, Ethan gathered every piece of evidence he had and headed to James Morrison's office, determined to find out what had really happened to Sophia and to save both her and his company from whatever Aaron and Zhao had planned. James Morrison's office was nothing like the sleek, modern spaces at Reed Financial. Located in an old brownstone in Midtown, it felt more like a professor's study than a tech executive's headquarters, walls lined with books, furniture that had been chosen for comfort rather than style, and large windows that let in the afternoon sun. The man himself matched his surroundings. At 65, James Morrison was a tech industry legend with silver hair and piercing blue eyes that had seen the rise and fall of countless technologies and entrepreneurs. When Ethan first arrived in New York with nothing but ambition and algorithms, Morrison had been the only established figure willing to mentor him. You look like hell, son, Morrison said as Ethan entered the office. I feel worse, Ethan replied, placing a thick folder on the antique desk. Everything I have on Sophia Chen and Aaron Wells is in here, plus what we know about the algorithm breach. Morrison nodded, gesturing to a leather chair. Sit. You need to hear something first. Ethan sat, his exhaustion momentarily catching up with him. I'm listening. I've known Victor Zhao for 30 years, Morrison began, leaning back in his chair. We started in this business around the same time on opposite sides of the Pacific. He's brilliant, ruthless, and obsessed with winning at any cost. But he's also predictable in his arrogance. Morrison took off his reading glasses, polishing them methodically. When he called me this morning to gloat about acquiring your algorithm, something didn't sound right. Zhao was too smug, too specific about certain details. He wanted me to know that your brilliant consultant had given him the algorithm willingly. Sophia would never do that, Ethan said firmly. I agree, which is why I made a few calls. Morrison picked up a manila folder and slid it across the desk. 2 months after being forced out of Quantum Shield, Sophia Chen briefly worked at Zhao Technologies, just under 8 weeks before being abruptly terminated. Ethan nodded. She mentioned that last night, said Aaron personally called Zhao and had her fired. Correct. The interesting part is what happened after. According to my sources, Aaron Wells and Victor Zhao have been collaborating for years, far longer than anyone realized. Zhao provided funding for Quantum Shield through shell companies, and in return, Aaron shared Sophia's innovations. Morrison pulled out several financial documents with highlighted sections. Here, 3 separate wire transfers from offshore accounts linked to Zhao, all coinciding with major technological breakthroughs at Quantum Shield during the period Sophia was still there. The timing is too perfect to be coincidental. So they've been working together all along, Ethan said, the pieces falling into place. But why would Zhao want Sophia now? Because Aaron Wells offered him something valuable enough to overlook past conflicts. Morrison leaned forward. The government contract you're both competing for is worth billions. With the quantum encryption algorithm, Zhao would have a significant advantage. Ethan shook his head. But Sophia solved that algorithm for me. If she's at Zhao's headquarters now— I don't think she went willingly, Morrison interrupted. And I don't think she gave them anything. Think about it, Ethan. Why would Zhao call me specifically to brag he wanted me to tell you? He wanted to drive a wedge between you and Sophia. Ethan processed this. So either he's lying about having the algorithm, or they have Sophia and are trying to force her to recreate her solution for them, Morrison finished grimly. The thought made Ethan's blood run cold. He stood up abruptly. I need to get to Zhao Technologies, now. Not so fast, Morrison pulled out another document. We need leverage. Remember how I said Zhao was predictable in his arrogance? He's also notoriously paranoid about information security. His systems are airtight from the outside, but vulnerable from within. Ethan finished seeing where Morrison was going. Exactly. His focus on external threats often leaves internal networks with surprising vulnerabilities. If Sophia is inside their building and can access a terminal, she could create a back door for us, Ethan said, hope flickering to life. But how do we communicate with her? They'll have taken her phone. Morrison smiled, pulling out an old-fashioned pocket watch. In this business, for 40 years, son, I've learned a few tricks. He opened the watch to reveal not a clock face, but a sophisticated digital display. Untraceable communication device. Old colleagues in government work. He winked. But we need someone Sophia trusts to make the connection. Professor Foster, Ethan said immediately. She's been mentoring Sophia since MIT. Make the call, Morrison said, pushing his secure phone toward Ethan. 20 minutes later, a plan was taking shape. Professor Diana Foster had agreed to help providing critical information about Sophia's coding techniques and unique signatures that could be used to establish secure communication. There's one more thing you should know, Morrison said gravely. I've been reviewing these legal documents from Aaron Wells. There's something peculiar about the notary stamp. I've seen it before. Ethan leaned closer to examine the documents. What am I looking for? The notary's license number. It belongs to a shell company established by Zhao Technologies 5 years ago. They've been working together much longer than anyone realized. I knew I recognized that number, Ethan said, remembering his earlier suspicion. This was never about intellectual property, was it? This was about the government contract all along. The quantum encryption protocol you've been developing is critical for next-generation secure communications. The military applications alone are worth billions. And now they have Sophia, Ethan said, his voice hardening with resolve. We need to move fast. Inside Zhao Technologies' gleaming headquarters, Sophia Chen sat in a sterile conference room, her hands steady on the keyboard, despite the fear churning in her stomach. Aaron stood behind her, monitoring her every keystroke, while Victor Zhao observed from across the table. The temporal variance calculation isn't working, Sophia said, her voice deliberately neutral. I need access to more processing power. Zhao, a severe man in his 50s with calculating eyes, nodded to Aaron. Give her what she needs. We have a deadline. That morning had begun with Aaron appearing at her door, claiming they needed to talk about a settlement. Instead, he had revealed Zhao waiting in a car outside, and the veiled threat had been clear. Come voluntarily or be taken anyway. Now she was essentially a prisoner, though they maintained the polite fiction that she was a consultant. The irony wasn't lost on her that they needed her to recreate an algorithm she'd already solved for Ethan, proof, if any were needed, that the work truly was hers. Sophia's hand moved to her father's old watch, a gesture that had become second nature whenever she needed strength. Aaron had overlooked the timepiece during their breakup, probably considering it worthless. He had no idea it was her most valuable possession, both emotionally and now potentially tactically. Access granted, Aaron said, typing in administrator credentials. You have 30 minutes before the system resets. I need more time, Sophia objected. You don't have more time. Aaron snapped, his composure slipping. The meeting with the government representatives is in 3 hours. We need a working demonstration by then. As Aaron and Zhao stepped away to converse in hushed tones, Sophia continued typing, her mind racing. She hadn't survived 3 years of professional exile without developing some survival skills. While appearing to work on the encryption protocol, she was actually inserting subtle markers into the code, digital breadcrumbs that would be meaningless to anyone except another MIT-trained cryptographer. If Diana Foster ever reviewed this code, she would immediately recognize the embedded message, coerced, false solution, help. The terminal suddenly flickered, a momentary glitch that would have been imperceptible to most users. But Sophia caught it, a split-second pattern that she recognized from her graduate work. It was the digital equivalent of a secret knock, one that Professor Foster had taught to only her most trusted students. Someone was trying to communicate with her. Someone who knew Diana. Heart pounding, Sophia continued coding while discreetly opening a hidden diagnostic window. A message appeared encrypted in a pattern she immediately recognized: S, E on secure channel. Morrison helping. Stall them. Insert vulnerability at node 7. We're coming. Delete this. Ethan was looking for her. Sophia closed the window and took a deep breath. Now she had a plan. I need a break, she announced loudly. I can't concentrate with you hovering. Aaron started to object, but Zhao raised a hand. 10 minutes. No communications. When they left her alone, Sophia worked quickly, inserting a carefully crafted vulnerability into the algorithm. To the untrained eye, it would appear to be a standard validation routine. In reality, it was a backdoor that would allow external access to Zhao's supposedly impenetrable system. What's more, she recognized that Aaron's security system was built on her own foundational code he'd stolen from her 3 years ago. In his arrogance, he hadn't bothered to substantially modify it, assuming she would never again have access to his systems. This was a critical mistake that gave Sophia an enormous advantage. She knew exactly where the weaknesses were because she had designed the original architecture. As she worked, Sophia couldn't help but feel a grim satisfaction. Aaron had always dismissed her mathematical intuition, focusing only on the algorithms she could explicitly explain. He never understood that true innovation often came from that intuitive leap that preceded formal proof, the ability to see patterns and connections before they could be articulated. It was this very quality that made her dangerous to him now. Meanwhile, across town, Ethan Morrison and Professor Foster were gathered around a complex array of equipment in Morrison's office. She's received our message, Foster confirmed, her fingers flying over her keyboard. And she's brilliant. Look at this. She pointed to code appearing on her screen. She's created a vulnerability that's practically invisible unless you know exactly what to look for. Ethan leaned closer. Can we use it? Already am in aim, Foster replied. Establishing connection now. We'll have access to their internal systems in 3 minutes. Wait, there's something else, Foster said, her eyes widening. Sophia's found a major weakness in their security architecture. It appears that Aaron Wells has been using Sophia's original security framework all these years. He barely modified it. She's exploiting vulnerabilities that only she would know about because she created the system in the first place. Poetic justice, Morrison commented with a grim smile. There's more, Foster added, leaning closer to her screen. She's not just creating a backdoor, she's implanting evidence. Look at this code. She's tracing the modifications Aaron made to her original work, showing exactly how and when he altered the documentation. It's like she's building a case from the inside. Morrison was on the phone with his contacts at the FBI. Yes, I understand the sensitivity, but I'm telling you, Zhao Technologies is holding an American citizen against her will and attempting to steal classified encryption technology. This isn't just corporate espionage, it's a matter of national security. Ethan paced the room, checking his watch repeatedly. Once we have proof, how quickly can they move in? Teams are already in position, Morrison assured him. They just need justification for a warrant. Got it, Foster announced triumphantly. I'm in their security system, accessing camera feeds now. Screens lit up showing various areas of the Zhao Technologies building. Their conference room on the executive floor. The image showed Sophia sitting alone at a terminal, her posture tense but her expression determined. Ethan felt relief wash over him quickly, followed by renewed concern. How do we get her out of there? First, we gather evidence, Morrison said. Professor, can you access their internal communications? Working on it, Foster replied. Their encryption is good, but not as good as their reputation suggests. Their email exchanges between Zhao and Aaron Wells going back 3 years. Multiple references to the Chen situation and quantum protocol acquisition. Forward everything to my FBI contact, Morrison instructed. Ethan, look at this. On another screen, a document appeared, the original partnership agreement between Sophia and Aaron. Morrison pointed to a specific section. The quantum computing clause has different formatting than the rest of the document. It was clearly added after the fact. Can you prove that? Ethan asked urgently. The document metadata shows it was modified 2 days after Sophia's signature was applied, Foster confirmed. Classic case of fraudulent alteration. This alone is enough for criminal charges. We need more, Ethan insisted. I want Aaron and Zhao both behind bars for this. As if on cue, the security feed showed Aaron and Zhao returning to the conference room where Sophia waited. Their body language was tense, intimidating. Audio, Ethan asked. Foster nodded, typing rapidly. Coming through now. Running out of patience. Zhao's voice came through clearly. The government representatives will be here in 2 hours. Either you complete the algorithm or there will be consequences. I'm working as fast as I can, Sophia replied calmly, but quantum encryption isn't something you can rush, unless you want solutions that collapse under actual usage conditions. Don't play games with us, Sophia, Aaron warned. Remember our agreement. Agreement, Sophia laughed bitterly. You mean your threats to destroy what's left of my professional reputation? Or are you referring to essentially kidnapping me this morning? No one forced you into that car, Aaron said smoothly. The two men with concealed weapons suggested otherwise, Sophia retorted. Ethan's jaw tightened at this revelation. That's kidnapping. Tell the FBI to move in now. Wait, Morrison cautioned. We need them to explicitly connect themselves to the fraud and coercion. Right now, they could claim this was just aggressive recruitment. On screen, Zhao moved closer to Sophia. Ms. Chen, let me be clear. You will complete this algorithm today, or the falsified evidence of corporate espionage that Mr. Wells has prepared will be sent to every technology company and law enforcement agency in the country. You'll never work in technology again, not even as a janitor. There it is, Morrison said grimly. Extortion on record. Making the call now. While Morrison coordinated with the FBI, Ethan kept his eyes fixed on the screen watching as Sophia continued to work under duress. Her fingers moved confidently over the keyboard, her expression revealing nothing of her inner turmoil. Even in this moment of extreme pressure, she was remarkable. I need to be there when they go in, Ethan said firmly. Absolutely not, Morrison objected. This is going to be a federal operation. They won't want civilians anywhere near the building. I'm not asking permission, Ethan said, already heading for the door. Professor Foster, can you maintain the connection and keep feeding information to the FBI? Of course, she replied without looking up from her screens. But Ethan James is right, this could be dangerous. So is leaving Sophia alone with those men for another minute, Ethan said. Morrison, are you coming or staying? The older man sighed heavily. You know, you remind me of myself at your age. Equally stubborn, equally reckless. He grabbed his coat. Let's go. I still have friends at the Bureau who might keep us from getting arrested for interfering. They arrived at Zhao Technologies just as FBI agents were establishing a perimeter around the building. Morrison immediately approached the agent in charge, flashing credentials that Ethan hadn't known he possessed. James Morrison, special advisor. This is Ethan Reed. He has direct knowledge of the situation and the victim. The agent, a stern woman in her 40s, eyed them skeptically. Mr. Morrison, your reputation precedes you, but this is a federal operation. You and Mr. Reed need to remain outside the perimeter. Agent, please, Ethan interjected. Sophia Chen is in there because of me. She was solving an algorithm for my company when she was targeted. I need to be there when you bring her out. Your personal feelings aren't relevant to this operation, Mr. Reed. But his technical expertise is, Morrison countered smoothly. Ethan Reed is one of the few people who understands the quantum encryption algorithm these suspects are trying to steal. If they attempt to delete or corrupt the evidence, you'll need his help to recover it. The agent wavered, then nodded curtly. You can join the technical team in the mobile command center, but you stay there until the building is secure. Understood. Inside the command center, Ethan watched the operation unfold on multiple screens. FBI cyber specialists were already using the backdoor Sophia had created to lock down Zhao's systems, preventing any evidence from being destroyed. Tactical teams were moving into position throughout the building. They're approaching the executive floor now, an agent reported. Target room in sight. The next few minutes were a blur of coordinated action. Armed agents swarmed into the conference room, securing Aaron and Zhao before they could react. Sophia remained perfectly still, her eyes wide, but her composure intact. Ms. Chen, are you all right? An agent asked, approaching her carefully. Sophia nodded. Yes, but they were about to force me to demonstrate a falsified version of my quantum encryption algorithm to government representatives. You should know that meeting is scheduled for, she glanced at her watch, 90 minutes from now. The agent spoke into his radio. We need to intercept any government representatives en route to Zhao Technologies. Possible attempt to defraud the federal government. Ethan couldn't wait any longer. Despite strict instructions to stay put, he slipped out of the command center and made his way to the executive floor. He arrived just as agents were escorting Aaron and Zhao, both in handcuffs, toward the elevator. Aaron spotted him first, his face contorting with rage. "You? This is your doing, Reed." Ethan ignored him, his eyes searching for Sophia. He found her sitting in a chair giving her statement to an FBI agent. When she looked up and saw him, the relief on her face was palpable. "Ethan," she said, standing immediately. The agent interviewing her paused, sensing the importance of the moment. "Are you hurt?" Ethan asked, crossing the room to her. "No, just angry and exhausted." Her voice was steady, but Ethan could see the slight tremor in her hands. "We'll finish this statement later, Ms. Chen," the agent said tactfully, stepping away to give them a moment of privacy. As soon as they were alone, they then pulled Sophia into his arms, holding her tightly, as if to reassure himself that she was really there, safe and whole. "When I couldn't reach you this morning, I thought—" "I know," Sophia interrupted, her face pressed against his shoulder. "But I knew you would figure it out. That's why I left those breadcrumbs in the code." Ethan pulled back slightly to look at her. "You never doubted I'd come for you." "Not for a second," Sophia said with the ghost of a smile. "You're stubborn that way." Ethan laughed softly, the tension of the past hours finally beginning to ease. "I had help, Morris and Professor Foster. Turns out you have more allies than you realized." "Speaking of allies," Morrison said, appearing behind them with the FBI agent in charge, "I hate to interrupt this reunion, but there's still work to do. Ms. Chen, these agents need your help to understand exactly what Wells and Zhao were attempting to steal." Sophia nodded, her professional demeanor returning. "Of course, but first there's something you should know." She turned to the FBI agent. "The backdoor I created in their system, it doesn't just give you access to their security cameras and emails. It gives you access to everything." "Define everything," the agent said cautiously. "Every server, every database, every communication Zhao Technologies has made in the past decade," Sophia explained. "Including, I suspect, evidence of industrial espionage against multiple American companies. Victor Zhao didn't become a tech giant by playing fair." The agent's eyes widened slightly. "Ms. Chen, would you be willing to assist our cyber division in navigating these systems? Your insight would be invaluable." "On one condition," Sophia replied. "When this is over, I want all record of my brief employment at Zhao Technologies expunged. That was a mistake made out of desperation, not collusion." "I believe that can be arranged," the agent agreed, "given the circumstances." The next 24 hours were a whirlwind of activity. Sophia worked alongside FBI cyber specialists to unravel the extensive network of industrial espionage Zhao had built over the years. The evidence was damning, not just against Zhao and Aaron, but against several high-profile executives who had collaborated with them. What surprised everyone, including Sophia, was the discovery that Aaron's betrayal went back even further than she had realized. Emails revealed that he had been in contact with Zhao since their graduate school days, strategically positioning himself to exploit Sophia's mathematical talents from the very beginning. "He never loved me," Sophia said quietly to Ethan, as they took a brief break in a conference room adjacent to the FBI's temporary command center. "It was all calculated from day one. Every moment, every kiss, every promise, all designed to get access to my work." Ethan covered her hand with his. "I'm so sorry." Sophia looked down at her father's watch, tracing its worn face with her finger. "The strange thing is, I don't feel devastated by that realization. I feel free. Like the last piece of doubt about whether I somehow deserved what happened has finally been put to rest." "You never deserved any of it," Ethan said firmly. "I know that now." Sophia met his eyes. "And I'm ready to build something new, something that's truly mine." 3 months later, the legal proceedings against Aaron Wells and Victor Zhao were well underway. The evidence Sophia had helped the FBI recover had led to multiple indictments for fraud, coercion, industrial espionage, and attempted theft of trade secrets. Both men were facing significant prison time, and their companies had been placed under federal oversight. The most damning evidence had come from Sophia's technical testimony in court, where she demonstrated in real time how Aaron had altered documents and systematically stolen her work. Using the original timestamps embedded in her father's watch, which contained a hidden backup drive she'd created during her time at Quantum Shield, Sophia was able to prove definitively that the intellectual property was hers. The courtroom had fallen silent as she methodically disassembled Aaron's security systems, pointing out where he'd simply copied her original code without understanding the subtle watermarks she'd embedded within it. It was the technical equivalent of an artist signing their canvas undeniable proof of authorship that Aaron in his arrogance had never discovered. Your innovative approach to hiding timestamps in that old watch saved the case, the lead prosecutor had told her afterward. The moment you used it to prove the chronology of your work versus Wells's forgeries, I've never seen a defendant deflate so completely. My father always said time was our most precious resource, Sophia had replied. I guess he was right in more ways than one. The government contract that Zhao had coveted so desperately was now securely in Reed Financial's portfolio, worth even more than the initial estimates had suggested. Their stock had not only recovered, but reached record highs. But for Sophia, the most significant development wasn't the legal victory or even the vindication of her professional reputation. It was the decision she had made about her future. I'm not joining Reed Financial, she told Ethan over dinner at his apartment 6 weeks after the raid on Zhao Technologies. I'm starting my own company. Ethan had expected this. In fact, he'd been formulating a proposal to support her. Tell me more. I want to build a security firm focused on quantum encryption, but with a specific mission. I want to hire brilliant women who've been pushed out of tech the way I was. There's so much untapped talent out there, people whose careers have been derailed by harassment, discrimination, or outright theft of their work. Ethan nodded, already envisioning how this could work. You'd be addressing a market inefficiency, tapping into a talent pool that others are overlooking. Exactly. Sophia's eyes lit up with excitement. And beyond the business case, there's the human impact. I know what it's like to believe your career is over, to feel that your talents are worthless. I want to create a place where people can rebuild, where merit actually matters. Phoenix Quantum, Ethan said thoughtfully. Sophia tilted her head. What Phoenix Quantum? That's what you should call it, rising from the ashes, focused on quantum security. It's perfect. A slow smile spread across Sophia's face. Phoenix Quantum. I like it. I want to invest, Ethan said immediately, as a silent partner. No control, just capital. Ethan, this isn't charity or favoritism, he said firmly. It's the smartest investment I could make. You've proven you're the best in the field, and your vision for this company makes perfect business sense. I'd be an idiot not to get in on the ground floor. Sophia studied him for a long moment, then nodded. All right, but we keep our personal and professional lives separate. The company succeeds or fails on its own merits. Agreed, Ethan said, raising his glass in a toast. To Phoenix Quantum. To new beginnings, Sophia added, clinking her glass against his. 6 months after that fateful night when a janitor solved an impossible algorithm, the top floor of Reed Financial Solutions was buzzing with a different kind of energy. Gone was the tense atmosphere of imminent financial disaster. Instead, the space hummed with the excitement of innovation and success. Ethan stood at the window of his office, watching the sunset paint Manhattan in shades of gold and crimson. But none of that was what made Ethan smile as he adjusted his tie and checked his watch. A knock at his door pulled him from his thoughts. James Morrison entered, looking more relaxed than Ethan had seen him in years. The car's waiting downstairs. You ready for this, son? Ethan took a deep breath. As ready as I'll ever be. Nervous, Morrison chuckled. The great Ethan Reed, who faces down corporate sharks without blinking, nervous about a dinner party. Not just any dinner party, Ethan reminded him. The official launch of Phoenix Quantum. This is Sophia's night. I want everything to be perfect. It will be, Morrison assured him. Diana's already there, making sure the technical demonstrations run smoothly. And from what I hear, the guest list is impressive. 3 government agencies, 5 Fortune 500 CTOs, and a dozen venture capital firms, all eager to work with the brilliant Sophia Chen. Ethan smiled at the thought. After the arrests of Aaron and Zhao, Sophia had declined his offer to join Reed Financial. Instead, with his full support and a significant investment, she had founded Phoenix Quantum, a company focused on developing secure quantum encryption protocols, with a team comprised entirely of women who, like Sophia, had faced discrimination or sabotage in the tech industry. Have you seen the Bloomberg article? Morrison asked, handing Ethan his phone. They're calling Phoenix Quantum the most important cybersecurity startup of the decade. Ethan scanned the article, pride swelling in his chest at the photo of Sophia standing confidently in front of her new company headquarters. The piece detailed her journey from MIT prodigy to industry outcast to founder and CEO, painting her as a symbol of resilience and innovation. She deserves all of this and more, Ethan said quietly. And the other matter, Morrison asked with a knowing look. Have you decided when? Ethan patted his jacket pocket, feeling the small velvet box inside. Tonight, after the speeches and demonstrations, once she's had her moment in the spotlight. Good man, Morrison approved. Though I still think you're taking a risk. Most men propose first, then the woman accepts. Sophia isn't most women, Ethan pointed out, and our relationship has never followed the conventional path. The launch event for Phoenix Quantum was being held at an elegant rooftop venue with panoramic views of the city. When Ethan arrived, the space was already filled with the elite of the tech and financial worlds, all gathered to witness the debut of what industry insiders were calling revolutionary technology. He spotted Sophia immediately. She was across the room, engaged in animated conversation with Professor Foster and a group of government officials. She wore a deep blue dress that caught the light as she moved her hair styled in elegant waves. The transformation from the janitor he'd met 6 months ago was striking, but what truly took his breath away was the confidence she now carried, the certainty of a woman who had reclaimed her rightful place in the world. As if sensing his presence, Sophia looked up, her eyes finding his across the crowded room. The smile that spread across her face made Ethan's heart race. She excused herself from her conversation and made her way toward him. You're late, she said when she reached him, her tone teasing. Fashionably so, Ethan replied, kissing her cheek. The venue looks amazing. How are you feeling? Terrified, Sophia admitted with a quiet laugh. But in a good way. 6 months ago, I was cleaning offices at midnight. Now I'm launching a company that could redefine digital security. You were always meant for this, Ethan said. The world just took a detour in recognizing it. The formal program began soon after, with Professor Foster introducing Sophia to thunderous applause. As she took the stage, Ethan felt a surge of emotion watching the woman he loved step fully into her power. 3 years ago, Sophia began, her voice clear and strong. I lost everything I had built. My company, my patents, my reputation. I was told repeatedly that my ideas weren't mine, that my contributions weren't valuable, that my voice wasn't worth hearing. She paused, letting the weight of those words settle over the audience. What I didn't lose was my knowledge, my ability, my determination. Those remained even when I was invisibly cleaning the offices of the very industry that had rejected me. Her eyes found Ethan's in the crowd and she smiled. And then something unexpected happened. Someone saw me, really saw me. Not as a janitor, not as a failed entrepreneur, but as exactly who I've always been: a mathematician, a creator, a problem solver. The demonstration that followed was flawless. Sophia and her team showed how their quantum encryption protocol could secure communications against even the most sophisticated attacks, including those from quantum computers. The technical brilliance was evident even to the non-specialists in the room, and by the time Sophia concluded, the audience was on their feet. Phoenix Quantum isn't just building security solutions, she concluded. We're creating a new paradigm where innovation is protected, where merit is recognized regardless of title or background, and where the best ideas win, not the loudest voices or the most powerful players. Thank you all for being part of this journey. Later, as the formal event transitioned to a more relaxed reception, Ethan found Sophia on the terrace, taking a moment alone beneath the stars. Congratulations, CEO Chen, he said, joining her at the railing. You've officially conquered the tech world. Sophia laughed. Hardly, but it's a start. She turned to face him. None of this would have happened without you, you know. I just saw what was already there, Ethan said. You did the hard part. Still, Sophia insisted, her hand unconsciously touching the old watch on her wrist. You believed in me when I didn't believe in myself. That matters, Ethan. The moment felt right. Ethan reached into his pocket for the ring he'd been carrying all evening. Sophia, there's something I want to ask you. But before he could continue, Sophia surprised him by taking a small box from her clutch. Actually, Ethan, there's something I want to ask you first. Ethan froze, momentarily stunned, as Sophia got down on one knee before him, opening the box to reveal a platinum band. Ethan, read, she said, her voice steady despite the enormity of the moment. You are brilliant, generous, and absolutely terrible at taking no for an answer. You've made me remember who I was before Aaron. and you've helped me become someone even better." She took a breath. "You challenge me. You support me. You make me laugh. And you've never once made me feel like I need to be smaller to make room for your ego." Ethan felt his heart hammering in his chest, a smile spreading across his face as Sophia continued. "I'm asking you to build a life with me, not as my savior or my investor or my business partner, but as my equal, as my best friend, as the person I choose to love for the rest of my life." She held up the ring. "So Ethan Reed, will you marry me?" For a moment, Ethan just stared at her. Then he started laughing, deep, joyful laughter that drew stares from nearby guests. "Yes," he said, pulling her up from the floor and into his arms. "Yes, absolutely. Definitely yes." As he kissed her, Ethan felt the last of the barriers between them finally crumble completely. When they broke apart, he was grinning. "Though I should mention," he said, "I also brought a ring." "Show me," Sophia challenged. Ethan pulled out his own small box, revealing a stunning solitaire that somehow managed to be both elegant and understated. "Sophia Chen," he said formally, "will you marry me back?" "That depends," Sophia replied with a grin. "Are you prepared for a lifetime of me being right about algorithms?" "I'm prepared for a lifetime of you being right about everything," Ethan said. "As long as you're prepared for a lifetime of me pretending to argue about it." "Deal," Sophia said and kissed him again. The courtroom was packed on the day of sentencing for Aaron Wells and Victor Zhao. Both men had been found guilty on multiple counts of fraud, coercion, industrial espionage, and attempted theft of trade secrets. The 9-week trial had become a sensation in the tech industry, with daily coverage highlighting the systematic sabotage of Sophia's career and the extensive corporate espionage network Zhao had built. Sophia sat in the front row beside Ethan, Professor Foster, and James Morrison. She wore the quiet confidence of someone who had already won the most important battle, reclaiming her life and future. The judge, a stern woman in her 60s with decades of experience in intellectual property cases, delivered her verdict with clear disdain for the defendants. The evidence presented in this case reveals not just isolated incidents of fraud, but a systematic campaign to appropriate another person's intellectual property and destroy their professional reputation. She stated, "Mr. Wells, your deliberate alteration of documents, manipulation of colleagues, and ongoing harassment of Ms. Chen represents one of the most egregious cases of intellectual property theft this court has seen." She turned her attention to Zhao. "And Mr. Zhao, your willing participation in this scheme, combined with your company's pattern of industrial espionage against American companies, demonstrates a flagrant disregard for the law." The sentences were substantial: 7 years for Aaron and 10 for Zhao, along with financial penalties that would effectively dismantle their business empires. As they were led away in handcuffs, Aaron turned to glare at Sophia one last time, his face twisted with hatred. But Sophia didn't feel the triumph she'd expected. Instead, she felt something closer to peace, the closing of a chapter that had consumed too much of her life already. "How do you feel?" Ethan asked quietly as they left the courthouse. Sophia thought for a moment, her hand resting on her father's watch. "My father always told me that time is our most precious resource. Don't let anyone steal your time, Sophie," he'd say. And that's exactly what Aaron did. He stole 3 years of my life. She looked up at Ethan, her eyes clear. "But I'm not going to give him any more of my time. I'm ready to move forward." 1 year after Sophia solved an impossible algorithm in Ethan's office, Phoenix Quantum had grown into one of the most respected cybersecurity firms in the country. Their quantum encryption protocols had become the industry standard, with contracts spanning government agencies, financial institutions, and technology companies worldwide. More importantly, the company had become a haven for brilliant women in tech who had been overlooked or pushed aside elsewhere. The wedding was intimate, held at a small vineyard in upstate New York with just 30 guests, a stark contrast to the high-profile corporate events that filled their professional calendars. Professor Foster was Sophia's matron of honor, while Morrison stood proudly as Ethan's best man. During the ceremony, Sophia wore her father's watch polished to a shine, but still bearing the scratches and wear that made it uniquely hers, a symbol of the journey that had brought her here. "Time is our most precious resource," she quoted in her vows, "and I choose to spend mine with you." Later, as they walked hand in hand through the vineyard that had witnessed their union, Sophia reflected on the strange turns life could take. A year ago, she'd been invisible, broken, convinced that her story was over. Now she was married to a man who saw her as she truly was, running a company built on her own terms, surrounded by people who valued her mind and her heart. "Any regrets?" Ethan asked, as if reading her thoughts. Sophia considered the question seriously. About Aaron, about the 3 years of struggle, about everything that had led her to that office building on the night she met Ethan. She stopped walking and turned to face him. "Not a single one," she said firmly, "because every terrible thing that happened led me to you, and this us is worth all of it. Even the part where I was an arrogant ass who challenged a janitor to solve impossible algorithms. Especially that part," Sophia said with a laugh. "Though for the record, I was never really a janitor." "No," Ethan agreed softly. "You were a brilliant woman waiting for the right moment to remind the world who she was." Sophia stood on her tiptoes to kiss him one more time. "Thank you for being my moment," Ethan read. "Thank you for being mine, Sophia Chen." As they walked back toward their waiting guests, planning a future that neither of them could have imagined a year earlier, Sophia realized that sometimes the best love stories begin with the ending of everything you thought you wanted. Sometimes you have to lose yourself completely to discover who you were meant to become. And sometimes, if you're very lucky, you find someone who sees your potential even when you've forgotten it exists. Someone who doesn't save you, but stands beside you while you save yourself. The night of her wedding, Sophia carefully placed her father's watch in a small display case next to a framed picture of her parents. It had served its purpose, guiding her through dark times, preserving the evidence that reclaimed her work, and reminding her of her father's most important lesson about the value of time. Now she had a lifetime ahead with Ethan to put that lesson into practice, building something neither of them could create alone.